Hello everyone, and in this hopefully short video I will be addressing the claim that atheism is not a belief system. The reason why I'm making this video is that over the years I've seen quite a few atheists making this claim, and just a couple of days ago I saw one video making the same claim, and I don't exactly agree with this argument, so I just thought I'd do a very simple take on it. I have to say this is not super complicated, and I'm sure many people would have seen the same line of arguments, but the idea is just that sometimes simple things are worth repeating, so this is not definitely nothing particularly groundbreaking here that I will be talking about. Alright, but let's start with first considering why is it that this claim is in the first place made by many atheists. Now, there are a couple of reasons, and primarily I would say I think the first reason is that it kind of gives atheists a sort of a high ground, in the sense that they avoid sort of answering certain difficult questions in terms of belief, because you can just basically say, if someone asks, well, what about this and what about that, like morality or meaning of life or things like that, it then becomes kind of easy to just say, well, I don't believe in anything, I just think it's all a coincidence and we're just here, there's no meaning, and so on. So it kind of makes things a lot easier. I think that's one reason. And then the second, which is not entirely unrelated, is that it kind of fits this idea of, I wrote here, all you need is a rationality type thinking. So that this idea is that as long as we have science, evidence, and ability to reason, we can solve all the problems. We don't need any silly beliefs that are a bit outdated and old-fashioned things. So we don't need to worry about that sort of things. So I think I understand why people make this claim, but I should also, I think, point out that even though I think atheism does imply some level of belief, as I will describe later on, I don't think this should be sort of be regarded as a major flaw or shortcoming with atheism. I think you can still. This is certainly not a point that, in my opinion, kind of defeats atheism, and therefore I think it's a bit unnecessary to keep repeating this point, because there's no real reason to be afraid that this is not true. So I think atheists could well concede that they have beliefs, in my opinion, but obviously that's not my position, so that is a decision for them to make. Right, so in the video I recently saw, there was an argument which I call now an argument from dictionary, which basically means that you kind of look up the meaning of a word in a dictionary and then use that as an argument to make your point. Now, in general, I would say that usually when people go to a dictionary, it's already a sign that it's not going to be a super strong case. I do that sometimes myself, of course, and I'm not entirely kind of saying that you should never check the dictionary, for sure, but usually you can tell that, I would say in most cases going to the dictionary is not going to give you a super strong argument. And now, so what I have here is I just took from my computer's dictionary a couple of examples, atheist and atheistic, and I didn't spend at all time going through different dictionaries. I'm sure you take any online dictionary, Merriam-Webster, Oxford English Dictionary, or whichever you prefer, and I think the case could be made that I'm making here. So the reason how this kind of argument from dictionary in this case works is that the atheist will highlight this phrase, as I've underlined here, that disbelieving or lacking belief. So the argument is that by atheism is defined in dictionary as a lack of belief. Therefore, they don't have a belief. Now, the thing that is I think you will find in every possible dictionary definition of this word will extend this, as I show here, lacking belief in the existence of God. It will be, I'm quite sure, in every dictionary that God will have to be mentioned, because that's what the word means. A is like a negation, and then theistic refers to God. So the definition means that there is a lack of belief in God, but it doesn't say anything about any other kind of beliefs. And that is why this argument from dictionary is in this case completely useless, because if an atheist has some other beliefs, they are not contradictory to this definition, as long as the atheist doesn't believe in the existence of God. And now, a couple of things I should clarify here. First of all, I'm perfectly happy to concede that atheism is not a religion. That's fine. And the other thing is that I'm perfectly happy to concede that atheists do not believe in the existence of any kind of God. But what I will shortly argue is that atheism tends to come with a belief, whether you want it or not. Right. So, let's see what my argument is for this inherent belief with atheism. So, here's a simple just a flowchart how we deduce this, my claim. So, we start with a simple question. Do you believe that a God exists? Now, if the answer is yes, we're done, basically. You are a theist. That's fine. We don't need to go into the details of that. But if you say no, then we need to ask another question. And in this case, the question is, do you know that a God does not exist? So here the emphasis, the key word is no. Do you actually know? I mean, in the previous question we established you don't believe that God exists, but now the question is, do you know that God does not exist? Now, you can say yes, in which case it is a clear case. You are an atheist. But this yes answer comes with a bit of a burden, and that burden is the burden of proof. Now, I know that there will be many atheists at this point sort of just saying, okay, that's it. This guy doesn't know what he's talking about. This is nonsense. The burden of proof is on the theists. And I know this is a very popular opinion that has been sort of popularized by many atheists. Ricky Gervais comes to my mind first, but others as well. But I tend to disagree quite strongly with this view. Now, it's a long topic to discuss, and I'm planning maybe to do a video on that later on, but that's not the topic for this video. So my view in this video would be just to say that if you answer yes to the question, do you know that a God exists? Oh, sorry, God does not exist. Then you are in a world of trouble, because you have the burden of proof of proving that God does not exist. And I think you will not be able to do that. Or at least, as far as I understand, no one has been able to do that yet, and I have a good reason to suspect that you won't be able to do that in the future either. So for this discussion, I've acknowledged it. I'm sure there will be many people who disagree with me on that, and I will address this point later on. But for now, this branch in this questioning should be considered sort of dealt with. Alright, so now if you answer no to the question, do you know that God does not exist? If the answer is no, then the next question will be, are you an agnostic? And if to that you answer yes, then again, we're done here. You are an agnostic, and we're all good. That's fine. And this seems, are you agnostic? Seems like a reasonable thing to ask at this point, because first you said you don't believe that God exists, but then you also said you don't know for a fact that God does not exist. So there's a level of sort of agnosticism there. You don't know how things are. So the question is, are you agnostic? And, that's a perfectly valid position to take. I'm not criticizing that in this video at all. So then we have one more remaining question. That if you answer no to the question of being agnostic, meaning that you refuse to be called agnostic, then it means that again you are an atheist. But now the question is, or not the question, but the inevitable conclusion seems to be that you just have to have a belief that God does not exist. Because if you were completely agnostic about the existence, you would be an agnostic, and you just said no to that, which means that some way you need to take the view that God does not exist. But earlier you also said that you do not know that God does not exist, which seems to be leave the only option is that you can't be agnostic, you can't be obviously theist. That's obvious. So you have to be atheist, but because you don't know, it means that you believe that there is no God, and this is how I think the belief inevitably is part of being an atheist. Now, I'm sure many atheists will object to this, and but I would like to reiterate what I said earlier. I don't think there is any major harm done if an atheist concedes that they have certain beliefs. That's absolutely fine. You can still choose to be an atheist if you want. I mean, obviously from my point of view, I would have other reasons for not being an atheist. But this idea of whether you have beliefs or not, I don't see why that would be such a big issue, to be honest. But for some reason, many atheists, or probably the reasons I mentioned at the beginning, many atheists are very reluctant to admit having beliefs. Alright, I think that's all I had to say in this video, so I hope again no one got offended, and God bless you all.